There are a lot of great places to visit during the summer. The beaches at the shore are amazing. The mountains are incredible, and the lakes are the greatest. But this year, my first stop was somewhere else, my local Volkswagen dealer. I got a terrific deal on a new Jetta, and those available features like adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitor, and front assist are great to have in summer traffic. Now I think I'll head out to some of my favorite summer destinations. Like, all of them.
Test drive the Volkswagen Jetta this summer at your local Volkswagen dealer.
Episode 834 of No BS Job Search Advice Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, the head coach for JobSearchCoachingHQ.com. Welcome. It's Sunday, and I'm continuing a series that I'm doing of bringing in some of my episodes from Job Search Radio, from where I interviewed experts about job hunting. Now, these are longer form shows, about a half hour in length, I would say. So it's a good investment in time for you to learn things related to effective interviewing. Now, this show was released, I believe, in 2014 or 2015. The material is still perfectly valid. My guest here, Stuart Taylor, did a very nice job on this show. Now, the audio quality was recorded over a phone line, so if it's not as good as it normally is, that's the reason why. But the material is still good, and I thought it was worthwhile. So I hope you find this helpful. I hope you give No BS Job Search Advice Radio 5 stars on whatever podcast service you listen to it on, and that you reach out to connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/The Big Game Hunter. Now, let's get going.
Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to Job Search Radio on webtalkradio.net. This is a show where I like to spend a half hour talking with an expert in recruiting about some element of job search, because frankly, in my 40 years of doing search, I found that people just don't do as well in job hunting as they do in their work. So on this particular show, we're going to be talking about interviewing. And my guest is Stuart C. Taylor, the president of Top Performers, a recruitment and training firm based in the Washington, D.C. area. Stuart recruits sales and management professionals in healthcare and a variety of other fields. In addition, he conducts interview training seminars nationwide and has appeared on numerous TV, radio, and other broadcast venues. He's the author of How to Ace a Job Interview. Stuart, welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you on.
Jeff, thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. Stuart, one thing I know about job hunters is they think they interview better than they do. And your laugh gives me agreement. Thank you.
That's so true.
And your book talks about 7 fundamentals of interviewing. So let's go through some of these fundamentals, okay? What's the first one that you would point to that job hunters need to focus in on?
I'm going to address that. I just want to circle back to your comment about interviewers thinking that they interview better than they do. The test on that is if you've been on more than one interview and you didn't get the job, you can interview better. That's the answer. So if someone thinks they're interviewing really well and they've been on several interviews and have not landed a job, they should be paying close attention, because it's very expensive and time-consuming to go around the interview circle without actually getting the job, and most of those things are fixable things. So hopefully we'll get to address some of those today.
I expect we will.
Yeah. In terms of the fundamentals, the first one is really a knowledge of what you want. I have an analogy in my book, How to Ace a Job Interview, which I call it the dating analogy. And it's very simple, and it's applicable to probably 99.999% of the living, breathing population. And that's dating. Everyone has dated at some point. They've gone out on dates. And simply put, the dynamic between the interviewer and the interviewee is virtually identical to that of two people dating with the intention of marriage or a long-term commitment. And if people understand that simple premise, these fundamentals will make sense, and you can apply it on an interview. For example, if you've ever dated
the game plan is for everyone to fall in love.
Yeah. Well, the only difference, the only exception to that dynamic being the same is you take out the romance, but everything else is really the same. The desire for long-term commitment, the trust, the ability to communicate, the common goals, the being better together than individually, all those things, just how you communicate, the interest, the expression of interest. And the knowledge of what you want, which is the first fundamental, which you had asked about. And so if you've ever been on a date where the person really didn't know what they wanted, but you know what you want, it's a very frustrating position to be in. And so when you're on an interviewer, the interviewer knows what they want. And when you show up, you have to demonstrate that you know what you want. You can't be all over the board. If they've got position A, you can't say, well, I'm also interested in B, C, D, E, and F, and I can do any of those things. You've got to be very focused to the specific needs of that employer.
And it's interesting, Stuart, because I find that job hunters walk in, some of them have seen a job description, some of them really haven't, and they are kind of all over the place. It's why when I coach people myself about interviewing, I want them to get laser focused on being able to deliver the information that the firm is looking for as well. So I'll talk with them about what I call the single best question they should ask on any interview. That's basically, thanking them for making the time to chat, that they had spoken with Stuart about the position and gotten the description, but want to get their take on the job. And so could they tell you about the position as they see it, the interviewer sees it, and what they could do to help, so that way they could focus in and not be all over the place, as you pointed out there.
Very good, and you touched on something critical, is I can't tell you how many people show up on a job interview that have not taken the time to find out what that job entails. So again, imagine a date, and your date says, I really want to marry you, I really want to be with you, you're the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. And then you ask them, so what do you know about me? And the person comes up crickets. They don't know anything about it. Well, all of a sudden their credibility is gone. You no longer can take that person as a serious candidate. And it's the same thing on the interview. If you have not taken the time to research the job, find out as much as you can about what are the specific requirements of that job, what are the requirements or the needs for that company, and what are my interests, so that they're lined up. You can't convince an interviewer of anything. And one of the first questions they'll often ask you is, so what do you know about our company? What do you know about this position? And if you can't answer anything, it's kind of hard to explain why you're there.
What sort of research, and how might they go about researching the company or the position?
Well, that's the beauty of it. It's really easy. I mean, everyone has the Internet at their fingertips, literally with iPhones. So one of the things I tell people, I do seminars, and one of the things I talk about in the seminars is there's no excuse to walk into an interview that you've had more than 5 minutes notice of without any information about the company. Because in 5 minutes, I can turn on my iPhone, go on the Internet, Google the company, and find out something about the company. Not even. In 2 minutes I can do that. So granted, most people have well more than 5 minutes to prepare. So if you haven't done that, when you have an interviewer, you're basically telling the interviewer, you weren't worth 5 minutes of my time. And so flip that. On the other side, it is so easy to access the information. You can do a web search. You can do go to their website, which is very helpful, although that's company-sponsored information, but it's a great start. So it'll give you what the company is promoting about themselves, which is important to know. Companies don't generally put out any dirt on themselves or anything that's wrong with the company, so that's where you're doing some additional due diligence to find out what is this environment, what's the climate, and it's not so much to say I'm not going to interview with this company, but it's to understand, hey, here's some of the challenges this company is dealing with in the marketplace, and now that I understand that, I can plug myself in and say, hey, here's how I can help address some of the challenges and the real-life situations that I might deal with as an employee of your company. Google searches, talking to existing employees, talking to companies' clients, their customers are a great source of information because they have nothing to hide. They'll tell you what they like, what they don't like, the challenges, the pitfalls, etc. So you have a good understanding of the scope of the position.
Beautiful. Great information, Stuart. Now, I know I took you off on a tangent a little bit there, but I think it's good material that you provided. So we covered the first one, knowledge of what you want. and then I took you off into the tangent of researching the firm, the job, and how to go about doing it. What would you say that the next fundamental is?
Well, interestingly enough, the tangent was the next one. So your tangent
perfect.
is perfect. is understanding the job and understanding the company. And that goes back to taking the time to find out if you can get a job description, read the job description. This does several things. One is it demonstrates to the employer or the interviewer that, hey, you are valuable enough for me to take the time to prepare. And the other thing it does, which is really important, is if I know what the 5 key things are that are required to duties in this particular job, I can then, prior to the interview, determine, well, how do my strengths line up with those requirements? So when I show up on the interview, I can actually point to point and say, I understand this is what's required. Here's how I fit that. And it's a very, very helpful exercise. It's a critical exercise for a successful interview.
Very well put, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. Unless people dot the I's and cross the T's for the interviewer, you can't assume that you're going to get the question asked of you that's going to allow you to reveal this. Better to be proactive and reveal the information in the course of answering a question than to have them try to pull teeth with you.
Right.
So we've got tips 1 and 2, or fundamentals 1 and 2. What would you say the third one is?
Well, you've got to have the ability to do the job. So Stuart Taylor is not going to go try out for the NBA because I don't have that ability. I can play a little corner hoops, but that's it. So you've got to, and again, if I don't read the job description, I may think I have the ability, but I really don't. So to move that obstacle out of the way, and it does not mean you can't have a stretch goal for a job. It just simply means, do I have what's required? If it's requiring a mechanical engineering degree, do I have that? Yes, no. If it's requiring management acumen, have I managed people? Have I managed situations? How have I handled that? So it's looking and making sure, do I have the necessary skill set? And what I talk about at length in my book is how to actually go about assessing your strengths and making sure they line up perfectly with whatever job you're applying for. And the reason for that being important is if I'm an employer and I've got a job that requires 10 key elements for the person to succeed in that position, and candidate A comes up to me and they present that they've got 9 of those 10 elements very effectively. Candidate B shows me they've got 10 of those 10 elements. I hire candidate B. Even if candidate A were actually better, if they're not able to communicate that they line up point by point with what the requirements are, that they've got the skill set required to perform those duties, a 90% is not good enough. I want someone that is 100% aligned with the job that I have, which means they've got to have the necessary background and skill set to do it. And where a lot of people fail on this is they don't take the time, even people that take the time to review the company, say, okay, I learned all about the job, I learned the job description. They don't take time to review themselves. Just do a self-assessment on yourself so that you know exactly what you're bringing to the table. The worst thing that can happen on an interview is you show up and you cannot remember one of the key things about yourself. Not remembering a key thing makes that thing invisible to the interviewer, which means you don't have it in their eyes. So you have to remember 10 out of 10 things or 5 out of 5 things, whatever the requirements are, and be able to articulate those. If you haven't done a simple spreadsheet on what are my strengths, what am I bringing to the table, and how do these line up with this particular job, you're doing yourself a disservice because nerves and all sorts of other things get in the way. Time can get in the way where you just don't remember to share those things. And if you've rehearsed it a few times in your head prior to the interview, it's a lot easier to have it at the tip of your tongue when you need it to say, here's my strength, here's how I line up with this particular job.
And as I'm sure you know, many interviewers are not particularly skillful. You and I, As veteran search people, we're working hard to extract information from job hunters. Yeah, we'd like it provided and offered up to us without a lot of effort, but because we have a financial interest, we go the extra mile. Many interviewers on the corporate side really don't, and they're not skillful enough to read between the lines in order to determine what's missing and that it might be there.
You hit that so on the head. That is such a great point, because I think most people go into an interview thinking that the interviewer knows everything because they're the interviewer. They've got to. And the reality is a lot of interviewers were, let's just say I do a lot with sales. So a lot of sales representatives that are great salespeople get promoted into a management position. Then guess what? They have an opening on their team, and they're told, go interview for this position. They don't know even what to ask for. They don't know what to say. They have their own knowledge, correct or incorrect, of a certain bit of information that they may know to ask you or not. And so you're sitting across the table from someone, and they might not know what to ask you to uncover your strengths. So the onus is on you, the candidate, the interviewer, the interviewee, the person that's being interviewed, has to know and be prepared to share who they are, despite the fact that the interviewer may not have the skills to uncover it. You've still got to make it visible, because that interviewer that doesn't have the skill or the experience is still going to evaluate you based on what you say or don't say. So you hit that on the head. That is such a great point.
My audience has heard me say many times that the skills needed to find a job are different than the skills needed to do a job. And the skills to be successful in a job are very different than the skills needed to interview, qualify, assess, and recruit and hire people for your team. They go hand in hand, but they're a completely different skill set. With the result being, as we both agree, there are people in the role of hiring not really all that capable of doing well in the hiring or the evaluation of the assessment. So the onus is on you, the job hunter, to make sure that everything is pre-chewed and pre-digested for the interviewer, so that when you walk out of the interview, there's not a doubt that you can do that job.
Excellent.
So we're going to come back to Stuart in just a moment, but first I'm going to go into my Job Search Insider tip for this show. And this one's on resume writing. And for those of you who've heard some of my interviews with people about effective resumes, you've heard guests and myself talk about the importance of metrics. And I want to lay out a formula for metrics and how to express it on a resume that I think will be very helpful. And this comes from an article I read this week about what Google recommends for displaying metrics in a resume. So, for example, what they ask people to do is state what they've done by comparison to others in the role. And then from there, explain exactly how they've gone about doing it. So in the example that they offer, they talk about wrote 50 op-ed articles for such and such newspaper by comparison to 6 for the average writer, and then talking about how they went about doing it. It's a very clear comparison between you and your competition that allows you to stand out. And it will be a subject for investigation once they invite you in for the interview. So that's my tip for this time. I want to come back to Stuart, and we've covered some great points so far. Let's go on to the fourth fundamental.
And by the way, I love your tip, and I loved it so much. I want to say something just to complement what you said. So often I get resumes, because I do recruiting, and I get resumes from people, and they put their percent to goal. For example, they put 105%, 110%, 120%. And what I tell them is, that's nice, but those are just numbers. That tells me that you're above your goal, but it doesn't tell me where you ranked in comparison to everyone else doing the same thing, which is what you just touched on. And so if you're 105% the goal and everyone else is 300% the goal, you're at the bottom. You're last. So the 100, or if you're 90% the goal and everyone else is 20% the goal, you're at the top. So just to support what you said is it's so important to put that relative data on your resume and when you're on an interview to make sure someone gets the understanding of what does that number mean? Where are you ranked? Are you the best or are you the worst? And you want to make sure that you're obviously highlighting where you're the best.
And for someone who might be an executive, you can talk about percentage growth within your business unit and compare it with what your predecessor did. So if growth is at 85% or 12%, and your predecessor had 1% or negative growth, you've demonstrated a baseline for comparison.
Exactly. Excellent.
Thank you. So we've got three of them so far, which is knowledge of what you want, researching the firm and the job, and, of course, the ability to do the job. What would you say the fourth fundamental is?
The fourth one, and I'm going to go back to the dating analogy to emphasize this point. If you are sitting across the table from someone that has got the look you've been looking for, they've got the intellect, they like the things you do, they've got all these things in common, and this is a person that you could imagine spending your life with because they've got everything that you're looking for. And they tell you that finally they give you the words you've always wanted to hear. And they say that they love you and they can't wait to spend the rest of their lives with you, and et cetera, et cetera. But they say it like this: I really, really love you. I really believe we could have a great, great, wonderful life together.
Can I have the check, please? Yeah, that's how I respond.
Exactly. It's not just what you say; it's how you say it, and it's got to be from the heart. It's got to be passionate. It's got to be, heartfelt. And people get on interviews. Don't forget, you're dealing with another human being. You can be serious, but that doesn't mean you can't be expressive. As a matter of fact, people want and need to see some form of expression and interest and enthusiasm from you. And so nerves can make you less enthusiastic, or thinking, well, I've got to be like this. Okay. Well, then your words can get lost. And so you need to make sure you're expressing with passion and enthusiasm your desire and interest to move forward with this company, just as you would want someone to do so with you if you were dating with the intention of getting married. You need that to feel that, wow, that's the glue. And I'll tell you, enthusiasm can cover a whole lot of evils and ills. If you're super enthusiastic and passionate, I don't mean jumping up on the table and dancing around or going crazy. I just mean expressing yourself, with desire and interest. And that can light someone's fire more than saying, hey, I'm a 5-time President's Club Award winner. And so, matter of fact, often it does, And so it's very important to show that. Be you, be excited, and let people know that you're interested.
And often it's the tiebreaker between one person and another. Because,
Absolutely.
Again, remembering how hiring managers are looked at, imagine you're a hiring manager. You've gone through 27 interviews. You've selected that one. That one special person you want to spend the next 3 years with, working side by side. And lo and behold, you extend an offer that gets turned down. Suddenly it becomes a basis of conversation. Why they turn it down. And the meta message invariably is, what did you do wrong that you couldn't get them on board? So often when hiring managers are dealing with two people who are very close, one of the things that causes them to choose one versus another is, do I think I can get this person on?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I'm just listening to what you're saying, and these principles for interviewing are also very effective on the reverse side for the employers. If you're interviewing with an employer that's completely dry and boring, you may not want that job either. Just like they may not want you if you're dry and boring. And so it's very interesting how the dynamics and the fundamentals are applicable to both the employer and the potential employee.
One of the tricks I tell job hunters, I've got a YouTube video about this, but one of the tricks I tell job hunters is the more they, meaning the employer, the hiring manager, talks, the more they seem to like you.
True.
So
very true.
When they get to that point where they're talking a lot, they're trying to sell to you because it matters to them that you're coming on board, and they want to leave you with a good feeling.
It does two things. It does exactly that. They're doing that, and people love to talk about themselves. And if you create an environment where someone can do that, they feel better about you. It's like, wow, I was able to express myself here. And so it covers both aspects.
Beautiful. What would you say the next fundamental is in interviews?
You got to have a positive attitude, and we don't have time today to get into all the specific details of what that means. It's a very deep statement by having a positive attitude. It doesn't just mean saying, hey, I can do this, which is part of it, but it is very important to go into an interview really with no negativity at all. And good interviewers will try to get you to tell on yourself or say something negative about yourself or say something negative about someone else or say something negative about a situation and see how you handle that. A good interviewee, which are all the people listening for jobs, will know that I don't care how many times someone asks me to try to say something negative or trash somebody else or really speak disparagingly about a situation or individual, I will not do it. I will describe a situation that's challenging. I will describe an individual, perhaps, that was challenging. But you'll never get me to personally attack that person, and I will always provide a solution on how I work through that negative situation or that challenge. And so, and again, I'm just covering the surface of this, but if there's one takeaway, it is to always provide solutions to the situation that you're in, and never leave a statement or an interviewer dangling with a problem. Like, oh yeah, that person was really terrible to work with. They didn't show up on time. They didn't know what they're doing. Period. Never end it with that. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't even speak that harshly about someone else. It would be more of along the lines of, well, yeah, that person was challenging. We had meetings, and they really weren't present at many of the meetings. So here's what I did. I allocated responsibilities to the other team members. We had a coaching session with that one missing, absentee member. We were able to bring the group together. At the end, kumbaya. We got everything done. The job was completed. We got an exceptional rating on the project. So you always ending it with, here's how I work through the difficult situation.
Nicely put. I had a situation with a candidate. He's on a fourth interview. Now, they're all being done by phone because he's in Canada. My client is in the heartland in the U.S. And he said something stupid about a former manager of his. And then he used the profanity in the interview. Now, when the client told me about this afterwards, I was dumbfounded. We're talking about a $175,000, $200,000 a year person who's hired people himself. He knows better. But employers have this way of drawing out the worst by buddying up sometimes, and people hurt themselves. So absolutely, positive attitude, nothing critical, being able to discuss the situation without personalizing it and being critical of anyone else.
Right. I'll give you a funny one. I had at my old company, we always had tag team interviews. So I would do the first interview, then another manager would do a follow-up interview on candidates that I liked and vice versa. And so there was this one candidate that I had liked, and she had done a very nice job, and I forwarded her on for a second interview. And due to this manager's schedule, he could only meet her for, like, a late lunch. And so he meets her for lunch, and the waitress comes by and says, well, would you like anything to drink? And she orders a glass of wine. And it was just funny because he said she ordered wine. So, now if the interviewer were to order first and order wine, that might be okay. But you got to stay on the conservative side. No profanity, no alcoholic beverages, no jokes. Just, you do want to be yourself, but not not transparent.
Not let it rip.
Exactly. So, it was very interesting, and you're right. Good interviewers are very good at getting people to put their guards down, and that's their job. It's like, okay, I want to find out who you are, and the interviewer needs to remember, I am in a professional situation. I can show them who I am. I can even tell them a personal example. But it's still an interview. It's still a professional environment. And if you decide to check that at the door, you're basically telling the employer that, by the way, when I'm hired, I'll do whatever I want to do because I don't even have any rules on the interview. And you're going to get yourself disqualified or increase the likelihood of that happening.
They are there to evaluate and assess. They are not there to be your friend.
Right.
And as a result, it is critical to keep the guard up because they're going to draw out the worst. So we've covered 5 points so far. We've got 2 more yet to go and not a lot of time. What's point number 6?
Well, I'll touch on the last 2 fairly quickly. The ability to communicate effectively with the interviewer, and that covers a multitude of levels as well, from body language to how you are speaking, your manner of speaking. I'll touch on a few things that I think will be helpful. Is going back to the terms of engagement and demonstrating interest and enthusiasm. Your body language, your eye contact, all communicates. It's very significant things to an interviewer, just as on a date, your body language and eye contact communicate very powerful messages. So one of the things is, the eye contact has to be excellent. Your handshake defines you. And I talked to someone several months ago on a program, and he's like, I can't believe we're still talking about the handshake. I'm like, but we are, because people don't necessarily realize when you shake someone's hand, if you have a firm professional business handshake, you have just defined yourself as confident, capable, professional. If you have a weak, wimpy handshake, or you catch them wrong, they catch your hand, catch the end of your fingers, or you've got no grip in your hand, you've communicated that I'm weak, I'm probably not very energetic, I probably don't have any impact or presence, and you've communicated that. So that's where they start. That's the first few seconds. And so your interview really can't succeed if you've started it off on a bad note like that. Eye contact as well. I'm confident if you're looking someone in the eye. If you're looking away every few minutes, or you're distracted by, let's just say you're interviewing in a hotel lobby and they're doing construction. Well, that's hard not to pay attention to. But if you're looking over at it every few seconds, you're conveying that, you know what, that is more important than whatever it is you're talking about. So you've got to focus, and you've got to practice doing this. Body language.
I'm going to pause you here for 1 second about the handshake, because our audience is an international audience, and the advice that you've given is very U.S.-centric, the firm handshake. In some cultures, a softer handshake is more appropriate. The depth of the bow is how the confidence is and respect is measured. So the advice Stuart is giving is appropriate for the U.S., but you have to do the positive thing for your culture in order to ensure that you're not unintentionally being perceived as being rude.
It's very, very true. Now, and I will, let me circle back to that. I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm being from the U.S. This information is U.S. centric. But if someone from another culture has a softer handshake and they come to the U.S., that is not acceptable. It still conveys the same, whether someone is from another country or from New York, and they are interviewing for the same position, and one person has a soft handshake because that's culturally acceptable in their culture, it will still communicate all the negative things in this culture. And so you have to know your audience, and probably vice versa. If a U.S. citizen were going to another culture where that's different, it would be very advisable to learn what's the best way to, for my salutations and greetings. But yes, here, particularly, and I've worked with some companies that are international companies that work with students and people coming in from other countries for interviews. They have to know that, you know what, if you have the soft handshake, you're going to get yourself disqualified, and you're not even going to know why you got disqualified, because they're not going to say you had a weak handshake. No one's going to tell you that. But they're going to make a decision based on that.
Exactly right. In the back of their mind, it sticks like a thorn, and they come up with a different excuse or an explanation for it, because there's something incongruent with your behavior with what their expectations are of someone in the role.
Right.
So, great tip. What's the 7th fundamental?
The 7th one is compatibility with the interviewer, and the simplest way to put that is if you're doing the other 6, you're very likely to be compatible with the interviewer. Now, here's the beauty of it. If the interviewer is the hiring manager and you find yourself very uncomfortable, you're just not feeling right, you're not compatible with this individual, don't take that badly. That's actually good. You do not want to step into a job where you're directly reporting to someone with whom you're not compatible. It's just like stepping into a relationship with someone with whom you're not compatible. It's a setup for absolute failure, misery, and it does not really matter what you're getting paid. It's not going to last. And then you've got another blemish on your resume for a short turnaround job. If, however, the person you're interviewing with is a screener or not the direct person that you would be reporting to, and you don't feel the warm fuzzies with that person, do bend over backwards, do somersaults to try to get to be as compatible as possible with this person so that they forward you on to the next step. I've had people that had initial interviews with someone, they're like, I really didn't like them. I didn't like the way they asked the questions. I was like, but that's not the person that's going to be hiring you, and you just stopped giving 100% midstream on an interview. So they disqualified you, and you never even got to the person that you'd be working with. That's sad. So sometimes you have to bite the bullet and say, okay, how can I adjust, or how can I just deal with this awkwardness to get to the next step? But there are lots of things, just from, again, it does go back to some of the physical, eye contact, et cetera. One of the things, if an interviewer is speaking really fast, just from a relatability standpoint, try to speak out a little more quickly. And I don't mean make yourself uncomfortable, but if an interviewer speaks very slowly, and you tend to speak quickly, slow it down just a notch so that you are on the same kind of wavelength as that interviewer and increases their comfort level.
I'll also mention that if you get lazy with the screener, you never know where you're going to run into them again. I've had so many instances where I've attempted to present someone to a client, and the firm tells me they met this person 2-3 years before and what their impressions of that person were at that time. You just never know. Doesn't matter what market area, what field you're in, what geography that you're in. It may seem like an enormous market, but it's far smaller than you think it is. And you'll discover very quickly how many people know one another and how mistakes like this come back to bite you in the butt.
Yeah. People don't forget. First impressions are almost impossible to erase.
Very true. Stuart, this has been terrific. Thank you so much. How can people reach you?
Okay, well, I've got a website. My company website is topperformers.com, topperformers.com, and it gives all sorts of means of reaching me or my company. We do recruiting, do interview coaching, interview training, both from the standpoint of job seekers as well as companies that are looking to help improve their management's ability to bring in and retain good talent. If someone wants to follow me on Twitter, my handle is GetTheJob123, GetTheJob123, and I have postings, and I'll be sure to post this program there as well, so everybody can follow. And you can reach me if you want to send a resume at resumes@topperformers.com.
And where's your book available?
The book is available on my website. It's also available on Amazon.com, and the book is called How to Ace a Job Interview by Stuart C. Taylor, How to Ace a Job Interview. And it's a quick, easy read. Take about an hour and a half to get through. And I'll tell you, the difference between moving on to a second interview or getting a job and not can be the difference of a thank you note, or the difference of something so small but usually fixable. And so what the book does is it covers all of those nuances, the subtle nuances, and the greater things, including the 7 fundamentals, that will help an individual really improve their interviewing skills. And like I said in the beginning, if someone's been on more than one interview or they haven't interviewed in a long time, this book has been helping everybody. Saying, I read the book, I got the job. I read the book, I got the job. And it's fun to read, believe it or not.
Beautiful. Stuart, thank you so much.
So that's today's show. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, here are a few ways to connect with me. First of all, if you're interested in one-to-one coaching from me, email me at jeffaltman@thebiggamehunter.us. In the subject line, put the word coaching. This way I know what it's about. I can get back in touch with you. We'll figure out a time to speak for an introductory conversation so that I learn what your needs are and you can figure out if I'm the right person to help you. Generally, I work with people at a manager level and above, but I do make exceptions from time to time. If you're not at that level and want advice from me, the best way is through JobSearch.Coaching HQ.com. There I have curated information that I've developed and others have as well that you can watch, listen to, or read that's going to help you find work more quickly. Again, you can ask me questions through the site. I'd be very happy to answer your questions. I look forward to helping you in either of those two ways. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn, send a connection request to me at linkedin.com/IN/TheBigGameHunter. Mention that you listen to the show because I love hearing from fans, from listeners who have been helped by the show. And like me on Facebook. The page is facebook.com/NoBSCoachingAdvice.com, or look for Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter there. Give me 5 stars, a great review. It helps other people discover the show. And I'll be back tomorrow with more. In the meantime, have a great day. Take care.
Summertime calls for a big splash. A 220,000 square foot one to be exact. And that's just what you'll get at America's largest indoor water park. Hair-raising water slides and rides, world-class spas, kids' play areas, and diverse dining options to ensure that there's something for everyone at this unbeatable family getaway. Kalahari Resorts and Conventions in the Poconos. Book now at KalahariResorts.com. Summertime calls for a big splash. A 220,000 square foot one to be exact. And that's just what you'll get at America's largest indoor water park. Hair-raising water slides and rides, world-class spas, kids' play areas, and diverse dining options to ensure that there's something for everyone at this unbeatable family getaway. Kalahari Resorts and Conventions in the Poconos. Book now at KalahariResorts.com.